I'm Kirk Hansen, Executive Director of the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics at Santa Clara University. A visitor to the Markkula Center today is David Miller. He's the Director of the Faith and Work Initiative at Princeton University. He also teaches business ethics. David, you've made a specialty. You've been studying the role of faith at work, in the workplace. And I've heard you argue that though we have not liked to let those two mix, companies haven't liked to have religion present in the workplace, that's beginning to change, is it?
Absolutely. There used to be three taboos in the workplace. You didn't talk about what? Sex, politics, or religion. Well, that's changed now. People talk about sex, they talk about politics, and indeed, some would say they do it, but that's another subject. But now this question of religion, and I don't mean religious in the sense of having a church service at work, but their spirituality, their spiritual orientation, whatever it is, they increasingly, employees want to bring that with them to work. Or put another way, they don't want to leave it behind when they go into the office.
So even though we're such a great secular nation, there's a desire to bring that spirituality back into one's life or just into the workplace?
Well, both. I think it's part of a broader societal trend that people at work, in the workplace, want to bring their whole self to work. They want to live an integrated, holistic life. So if one is female, that you shouldn't feel that you have to act in a male way. You could be yourself. If you're gay or if you're lesbian or if you have a certain ethnicity, you don't have to be embarrassed about who you are and how you're wired and how the kind of person you are. You could bring your whole self to work. You don't have to hide that. Well, for a lot of people, and if you believe the data, somewhere around 90% of the nation's citizens have some sort of spiritual orientation, some sort of belief in a God or a higher power, whatever you want to call it. So as part of this macro trend to be holistic at work, they're also saying, well, that's part of what makes me tick. So I want to not have to deny that part of my identity. I want to bring that with me to work. Now, it may be very subtle and low-key. You may never know it. It's not like people are going to come in with bumper stickers all of a sudden saying, honk if you love Jesus, or things like that. But it's just part of the fiber of what makes a lot of people tick.
What does this have to do with the movement for business ethics? Is this related to what you and I work with companies on in terms of promoting ethics?
In many ways. My research shows that there are four typical ways that people of faith, again, whatever their tradition, whether Jewish, Christian, whatever, that people of faith will manifest or live out their faith or their spirituality at work. And one of those four ways is ethics. So in the space that you and I care so dearly about, I'm interested in researching and studying, among other things, how does one's spiritual roots, spiritual orientation help make one more ethical, perhaps give one a certain sense of moral courage to identify and stand up when things are not kosher, if you'll pardon the pun.
How does a company deal with this new phenomenon? People wanting to be explicitly religious, even if they don't have a bumper strip on their head, honk if you love Jesus.
Or honk if you love Kirk.
Yeah, how does the company deal with the desire to pray, the desire to talk about religion, the desire to live one's religious values out in the workplace?
I would answer in one word: carefully. And the secondly, and not to be flip, there's not a one-size-fits-all. This isn't something, here are the 7 simple steps, once you've done that, done. You need to understand the history of the company, its DNA, what part of the nation it's in, where is it doing business. But then I would say a major part of it is harnessing this energy and putting in place, articulating clear sets of policies and practices as to what's permitted, what's encouraged, and actually where you draw a line, so that people have a sense of clarity. But you know, the corporate world it's no stranger to dealing with delicate subjects. Think back a few decades, it's not that long ago that racism was a difficult thing. People didn't have a vocabulary or a framework to talk about blacks or African Americans or Negroes or colored people or whatever the language was. Many companies started affirmative action programs. Some were good, some were not so good.
Here in Silicon,
you can learn from those things.
Yeah, here in Silicon Valley, we have a lot of Muslim employees.
Yeah.
We have a lot of Buddhist employees, a lot of Confucian employees. For the Muslims, are you recommending that companies think in terms of prayer rooms and providing resources for people who want to pray during the day?
Well, you're focusing, I'll answer that, but first you're focusing just in one dimension, that's prayer. And there are many other manifestations, most of them that are unseen, of how one lives out their spirituality. Ethics, for example, is something that's just unseen. It's how someone lives their life. But as you've asked about prayer, I would say that the policies and practices you put in place need to be consistent across the board. So that if you're doing something to assist one group who may have certain other religious requirements, let's say, that you need to say, am I being fair to other groups and their analogous sets of requirements? If a company has adequate resources and space, I think in many cases, not in all, but in some cases it may be fully appropriate to have a quiet room or a prayer room or a meditation room, but not just for Muslims, but for Christians or for New Agers or for people who are spiritual but not religious, where they just might want a quiet space. Indeed, many companies are doing that, and it's very well received by their employees. Even if you never walk in the door, some people feel kind of proud that their companies are attentive to this issue of diversity.
One last question. Some people get concerned about taking your religion to work if it's the CEO, if it's the owner of the company, and that may create a chill for rest of employees. Is there a different set of norms about a CEO taking her values to work or his values to work?
Well, of course, a CEO has to take her values to work, or else she's not going to be a good CEO. Now, the source of their values, let's say it's their faith, there they have to tread carefully. My general guidance to the various CEOs that I work with is that they have to be aware of asymmetric power. And while on the one hand, being open about the source of their values, their faith, let's say, might be encouraging to a lot of people, it could be threatening or off-putting to others. In general, I advise that CEOs create an arena of permission where people can bring their whole self to work, but that they be very careful about their own particular articulation of their worldview so as to not ever have it be seen as something that's a quid pro quo or implied for others to have.
David, thank you for being with us here at the center today.
Kirk, it's a terrific, always to be with you and great fun. Thank you.